How does a single celebratory kiss at work become the spark that burns through a marriage in front of everyone I know? Why did my husband, humiliated in public, choose to fight back not with anger, but with paperwork and silence, turning my own story against me until the final, devastating moment when I realized who the real villain was? Can I still blame him when the outcome lands in my hands? I'm Levana Thorne, and 6 months ago, I thought I was unstoppable. Marketing manager at TechFlow Dynamics, rising star, the woman everyone wanted to be. I had the corner office view, the viral moments, the kind of confidence that made people lean in when I spoke. My husband Owen, high school history teacher, steady, reliable, safe. Too safe, I told myself. While I was climbing mountains, he was content grading papers and coaching debate club. I should have seen the warning signs. I should have noticed when the applause started drowning out everything else. The startup HQ buzzed with energy that Tuesday evening. Our quarterly celebration was in full swing, and I stood on the makeshift stage in our open-plan office, holding the Innovation Leader Award while cameras flashed. The weight of recognition felt intoxicating. Months of 18-hour days, weekend strategy sessions, and pushing boundaries had finally paid off. Levana's vision transformed our client acquisition by 300%. Damien Keller announced into the microphone, his hand warm on my shoulder. At 41, my boss commanded every room he entered. Sharp jawline, silver at his temples, the kind of presence that made board members write bigger checks. She's the future of this company. The crowd erupted. My phone buzzed with notifications as colleagues posted videos to their stories. This was my moment, the validation I'd craved since joining the startup 18 months ago. Then Damien leaned in, his cologne mixing with the champagne on his breath. "You deserve this," he whispered, and before I could process it, his lips were on mine. Not a quick peck, a real kiss, firm and deliberate, while the crowd cheered louder. I should have pulled away, should have laughed it off, created distance. Instead, I melted into it for just a second too long, my hand finding his chest as the cameras captured everything. When we broke apart, the applause was deafening. I laughed, raising my award higher, playing to the crowd. "Startup culture, right?" I called out, and everyone roared approval. But in the back of the room, Owen stood frozen by the catering table, his face blank as stone. "That was incredible." Marina Feld, my closest friend and our social media coordinator, grabbed my arm as I stepped off the stage. Her dark eyes sparkled with excitement. "You looked like a power couple up there. Owen needs to step up his game." I glanced back at my husband, but he was already walking toward the exit, his shoulders rigid. "He's just not used to this level of success," I told Marina, but something cold twisted in my stomach. "He'll adjust." The ride home was silent. Owen drove with mechanical precision, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I scrolled through the notifications flooding my phone, likes, comments, shares. The video was already spreading beyond our company. "People are calling it inspiring," I said, trying to fill the silence. "Authentic leadership in action." Owen said nothing. "You're being dramatic," I continued, my voice sharper now. It was a celebration. Damien was caught up in the moment. "Were you?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "What's that supposed to mean?" He pulled into our apartment complex parking garage, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his face. "Nothing, Levana. Congratulations on your award." That night, he slept in the guest room for the first time in our 8-year marriage. I told myself it was his insecurity talking. Owen had always been threatened by my ambition, my willingness to take risks he'd never dare. While I was building something extraordinary, he was content with his small, predictable world of teenagers and textbooks. But as I lay alone in our king-sized bed, scrolling through comments praising my fearless authenticity, I couldn't shake the image of his expression, not angry, but calculating, like he was taking notes. The next morning, I found him at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee, marking something in his planner. "What's that?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "Just organizing some things." He closed the planner before I could see. "I have a few appointments downtown this week." "Appointments for what?" "Personal business." His tone was pleasant, neutral. Too neutral. I wanted to press, but my phone was already buzzing with work calls. Damien wanted to discuss leveraging my viral moment for the upcoming investor pitch. The momentum was building, and I couldn't let Owen's mood derail my trajectory. "We'll talk tonight," I said, grabbing my bag. He nodded, but his eyes were already back on his planner, pen moving across the page in neat, methodical strokes. The video hit 2 million views by Thursday. TechFlow's social media engagement skyrocketed, and Damien scheduled an emergency strategy meeting to capitalize on the momentum. "You're a phenomenon," he said, leaning against my desk as I compiled metrics. "Authentic, relatable, aspirational. The investors are going to love this energy at next month's dinner." I basked in his attention, the way his eyes lingered on my face when he spoke. Owen had barely looked at me in 3 days, but here was someone who truly saw my worth. "I've been thinking," Damien continued, his voice dropping lower. "We should do a follow-up piece, show the real culture we're building here. You and I leading by example." The suggestion sent electricity through me. "What did you have in mind?" "There's a networking event on the rooftop tomorrow. Key players from across the city. Perfect opportunity for you to shine." I agreed immediately, already envisioning the possibilities. At home, Owen had retreated further into his shell. He'd taken over the guest room completely. His clothes moved, his books arranged on the small desk, his laptop always open to spreadsheets and documents I couldn't quite see before he closed them. "You're being ridiculous," I told him over dinner, our 7-year-old daughter Eva picking at her pasta between us. "It's work. You act like I'm having an affair." "Are you?" The question was so quiet I almost missed it. "Excuse me?" Eva looked up from her plate, her dark eyes, Owen's eyes, wide with confusion. "Nothing," Owen said, cutting his chicken with precise movements. "How was school, Eva?" Our daughter launched into a story about art class, but I caught the way she kept glancing between us, sensing the tension that filled our modern apartment like smoke. That night, I called Marina. "He's being impossible," I vented, pacing our living room while Owen graded papers in the guest room. "I'm finally getting the recognition I deserve, and he's acting like I've committed some crime." "Because he's weak," Marina said bluntly. "Levana, you're a force of nature. He can't handle being married to someone more successful than him. Classic fragile masculinity." Her words soothed the doubt gnawing at me. "You're right. I can't shrink myself to make him comfortable." "Exactly. Own your power. Let him deal with his insecurities." Friday's rooftop event was everything I'd hoped. The city skyline glittered around us as industry leaders mingled under string lights. I wore my red power dress, the one that made me feel invincible, and worked the crowd with Damien at my side. "Levana's the secret weapon," he told a group of potential investors, his hand settling naturally on my lower back. "She doesn't just think outside the box. She redesigns it entirely." The attention was intoxicating. Business cards, LinkedIn requests, invitations to speak at conferences. This was the life I'd always imagined for myself. Then I saw Owen by the elevator, his teacher's salary clearly evident in his department store shirt among the designer suits. He'd come. Despite everything, he'd shown up. I should have gone to him, should have introduced him around, included him in my triumph. Instead, I let Damien guide me toward the bar, pretending I hadn't noticed. "To the future," Damien said, raising his champagne flute. "To the future," I echoed, and when he kissed me again, longer this time, his hand tangled in my hair, I didn't resist. The crowd around us erupted in approval. Phones appeared, capturing the moment. Someone shouted about relationship goals and power couple energy. When I opened my eyes, Owen was gone. But the damage was done. By Saturday morning, the second video had spread even further than the first. Some power couple was trending. Lifestyle bloggers were analyzing our chemistry. A gossip site had somehow identified Owen and was calling him the forgotten husband. I found him in the guest room, surrounded by manila folders and printouts, his laptop displaying what looked like a timeline. "Owen, we need to talk." He looked up, his expression eerily calm. "Do we? This is getting out of hand. People are making assumptions. Are they wrong?" The question hung between us like a blade. I wanted to deny it, to explain that it was just work, just performance, just the price of success. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I went on the offensive. "You're being paranoid. Damien and I have a professional relationship. If you can't handle my success..." "Your success." He repeated the words like he was tasting something bitter. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes. While you're hiding in here playing with your little folders, I'm building something extraordinary. I'm sorry if that threatens you." Owen nodded slowly, making a note on a legal pad. "Interesting perspective." "Stop writing," I snapped. "What is all this?" "Documentation," he said simply. "Some things need proof." I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. "Proof of what? That your wife is successful? That she's finally getting the recognition she deserves?" "Something like that." He capped his pen with deliberate precision. "Eva's asking questions, by the way, about why Mommy kisses her boss, about why Daddy sleeps in the office." Guilt twisted in my chest, but I pushed it down. "She's 7. She doesn't understand adult relationships." "No," Owen agreed. "She doesn't. But she will." The following weeks blurred together in a haze of meetings, strategy sessions, and increasingly frequent celebrations with Damien. TechFlow's profile had never been higher, and I was at the center of it all. But home became a battlefield of silence. Owen's routine grew more methodical. He'd wake at 5:30 a.m., prepare Eva's breakfast and lunch, then disappear into the guest room with his coffee and folders. He'd emerge only for family meals, where he'd ask Eva about school and ignore me entirely. "Daddy's sad," Eva announced one morning, spreading peanut butter on her toast with the concentrated focus only children possess. "Why do you say that?" I asked, though my stomach clenched. "He draws sad faces on his papers, and he talks to his computer like it's a person." I glanced toward the guest room, where I could hear the low murmur of Owen's voice. A video call, probably with his lawyer, though I had no proof he'd hired one. Yet. "Daddy's just working through some things," I told Eva, the lie tasting bitter. At work, Priya Sen from HR had started asking pointed questions about workplace optics and professional boundaries. I deflected with talk of innovation and authentic leadership, but her expression remained skeptical. "The board has concerns," she said during our Friday meeting, her dark eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The viral videos are getting attention, but not all of it is positive. Some people are questioning the professional environment we're cultivating." "People are always threatened by authentic success," I replied smoothly. "We're not a stuffy corporate environment. We're building the future." "Levana," Priya's voice was gentle but firm, "I need you to consider how these displays might affect team dynamics and your personal life." I wanted to snap at her, to point out that my personal life was none of her business. Instead, I smiled. "I appreciate your concern, but I think you're overthinking this. Damien and I are building something revolutionary. Sometimes that requires breaking conventional boundaries." Priya made a note in her file. "Just be careful. Revolution has a way of consuming its leaders." That weekend, Owen's family came for Eva's birthday lunch. His parents, his sister, his Aunt Yelena, all gathered around our dining table with forced smiles and careful conversation. "The videos are certainly memorable," Aunt Yelena said, her voice dripping with disapproval. At 57, she'd never married, never compromised, never understood the complexities of modern relationships. Levana's become quite famous, Owen's mother added, her tone neutral but her eyes worried. It's professional recognition, I said firmly, something to be proud of. Is it? Aunt Yolena's sharp gaze cut through me. Because from where I sit, it looks like public humiliation, for all of you. Eva looked up from her birthday cake, frosting on her chin. What's humiliation? The table fell silent. Owen reached over to wipe her face with a napkin, his movements gentle and deliberate. It's when someone makes you feel small in front of other people, he said quietly. But it only works if you let it. The words felt aimed at me, but when I looked at him, his attention was entirely on our daughter. Later, as the family filtered out with awkward hugs and worried glances, I found Owen loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. Your family thinks I'm a terrible person, I said. Do they? He didn't look up from the plates. You could defend me, support me, act like we're actually married. Now he did look at me, his expression unreadable. What would you like me to say, Levana? That I'm proud of my wife for kissing her boss on camera? That I enjoy being called the forgotten husband by strangers on the internet? It's not about you. The words exploded out of me. This is my career, my success, my moment. Why can't you just be happy for me? Your moment, he repeated, the same way he'd said, your success, weeks ago. Yes, I can see that. He finished loading the dishwasher and walked toward the guest room, pausing in the doorway. Eva drew us a family picture in art class, he said without turning around. Want to see it? Before I could answer, he disappeared into his makeshift office. A moment later, he emerged with a piece of construction paper. The drawing showed 3 figures, Eva in the middle with her characteristic pigtails, me on one side with a big red smile, and Owen on the other side, grey and distant, separated from us by what looked like a wall of scribbled black lines. She's 7, I whispered. Yes, Owen agreed. Old enough to see, not old enough to understand why. He took the drawing back into the guest room and closed the door. I heard the lock click, a new addition I'd pretended not to notice. That night, I posted a photo from Eva's party with the caption, "Growth hurts those who stay small. Grateful for the people who celebrate my journey instead of trying to dim my light." Authentic leadership, Charshian, no apologies. The likes poured in immediately. Marina commented with fire emojis. Damien hearted it within minutes. But as I scrolled through the responses, I caught my reflection in my phone screen, alone in our bedroom, seeking validation from strangers, while my husband documented my betrayals in the next room. For just a moment, I wondered if Aunt Yolena was right, if the humiliation was mine after all. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Investor dinner is next month. Time to show them what real leadership looks like. You ready to make history? I typed back immediately, always. The doubt vanished, replaced by the familiar rush of ambition. Owen could keep his folders and his timeline and his wounded silence. I had a future to build. October brought a chill that seemed to seep into everything. The apartment, my marriage, the careful facade I'd built around my choices. Owen's methodical routine had evolved into something that felt almost ritualistic. He'd wake before dawn, prepare Eva's breakfast with military precision, then disappear into the guest room, where the soft hum of the printer had become as regular as a heartbeat. "What are you printing in there?" I asked one morning, trying to keep my voice casual. "Documents," he replied, not looking up from Eva's lunch preparation. "School stuff mostly." But I'd seen the delivery confirmations in our mailbox, legal-sized envelopes, office supply orders, things that had nothing to do with teaching high school history. At work, the pressure was mounting. Priya had scheduled another informal chat about workplace dynamics, and I could feel the shift in how colleagues looked at me. The viral videos had brought attention, but whispers followed in their wake. Some people are saying it's unprofessional, whispered Jake from accounting during a coffee break. But I think it's cool. Real, authentic leadership, you know. His words should have felt like support, but something in his tone suggested he was fishing for gossip rather than offering genuine praise. Damien, meanwhile, seemed energized by the controversy. Disruptors always face resistance, he told me during our weekly strategy session. The investor dinner next month is our chance to show them what revolutionary leadership looks like. He'd moved his chair closer to mine, his hand resting on my arm as he spoke. The gesture felt natural now, expected. When had the boundaries dissolved so completely? I've been thinking about your presentation, he continued. Something bold, something that shows you're not just talking about innovation, you're living it. The suggestion sent familiar electricity through me, but underneath was something else. Unease, maybe, or the growing awareness that I was performing in a play whose ending I hadn't read. At home, Eva had started asking uncomfortable questions. "Why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" she asked one evening, poking at her chicken nuggets. Owen had taken to eating earlier, claiming he needed to prepare for tomorrow's classes. But I'd seen him in the guest room during dinner time, surrounded by papers and speaking in low tones on video calls. "Daddy's just busy with work," I told her, the lie feeling heavier each time I said it. "Is he mad at you?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Why would you think that?" Eva shrugged, her 7-year-old wisdom cutting deeper than any adult accusation. "He looks at you like you're a stranger." That night, I tried to breach the wall Owen had built around himself. I knocked on the guest room door, but there was no answer. I could hear him inside, the soft click of keyboard keys, the rustle of papers, the occasional scratch of pen on paper. "Owen?" I called softly. "Can we talk?" The sound stopped. Then, "I'm busy, Levana. I know things have been tense, but we need to figure this out. For Eva's sake." A long pause. Then the door opened, and Owen appeared, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of the guest room, transformed into something that looked more like a detective's office than a bedroom. Corkboards with printed photos, timelines, folders labeled with dates I recognized. "What is all that?" I asked, trying to peer around him. He stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind him. "Research." "Research for what?" "A project I'm working on." His voice was calm, professional. The tone he used with difficult students. "What did you want to discuss?" The casual dismissal stung. "Our marriage, Owen, our family. Ava's asking questions I don't know how to answer." "Tell her the truth." "Which is what, exactly?" He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, calculation. "That sometimes people change," he said finally. "That sometimes the person you married becomes someone you don't recognize." "I haven't changed," I protested. "I've grown. I've succeeded. I thought you'd be proud." "Proud." He tested the word like it was foreign. "Yes, I can see how you'd expect that." "What's that supposed to mean?" Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. A few taps, and he was showing me a screenshot of my latest Instagram post, the one from Eva's birthday with the caption about growth and dimming lights. 47 comments, he said conversationally. Most of them supportive, a few asking about your husband, one particularly interesting thread about outdated marriage expectations and supporting a woman's journey. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. People understand what I'm going through. Do they? He scrolled down, showing me more screenshots. Comments I'd liked, responses I'd hearted, a digital trail of validation I'd been collecting like trophies. Because from here, it looks like you're telling our story to strangers, our private struggles, Eva's confusion, my supposed inadequacies, all packaged into inspirational content. The accusation hit home because it was true. I had been sharing more, using our conflict as proof of my authenticity, my willingness to be vulnerable about the challenges of success. "That's not," I started, but he was already putting his phone away. "I have work to finish," he said, hand on the doorknob. "The investor dinner is next week, right?" The change of subject threw me. "Yes. How did you—" Eva mentioned it. Something about Mummy's big night with Damien. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I'm sure it will be memorable." He disappeared back into the guest room, leaving me standing in the hallway with the growing sense that I was missing something crucial. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the printer again, a steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to our disintegrating marriage. But this time, there was something else. The sharp mechanical whir of the paper shredder. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Owen was already gone. Eva sat at the table with her cereal, a note propped against the milk carton in Owen's neat handwriting. "Parent-teacher conferences today. We'll be late. Dinner is in the fridge." "Where's Daddy?" Eva asked. "Work stuff," I said automatically, but my attention was on the guest room door, slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see the edge of his desk, neater than usual, with only a few folders remaining. My phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "Final prep meeting at 2. Tonight's the night we make history." The investor dinner. Our moment to shine. I should have been excited, energized, ready to claim my place in the spotlight. Instead, I stared at that partially open door and wondered what Owen had been shredding. The day of the investor dinner arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe was mocking the chill that had settled over my personal life. I spent the morning at the salon, then the afternoon in meetings, preparing for what Damien called the performance of your career. "Tonight changes everything," he said, straightening his tie in the reflection of my office window. "The investors want to see innovation, authenticity, the kind of leadership that breaks boundaries. You're going to give them exactly that." His confidence was infectious, drowning out the voice in my head that had been growing louder over the past weeks. The voice that sounded suspiciously like Aunt Yolena, asking uncomfortable questions about the price of my ambition. The downtown hotel ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, tables set with precision that would have impressed Owen's methodical nature. I wore my black designer dress, the one that made me feel invincible, and worked the room with practiced charm. "Levana Thorne," I introduced myself to a silver-haired investor from New York. "I'm the innovation leader you've been hearing about." Recognition flickered in his eyes. The videos, the articles, the carefully cultivated image of fearless authenticity. "Ah, yes, the viral sensation. Quite the impression you've made." The words should have thrilled me, but something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely impressed. Still, I smiled and launched into my rehearsed pitch about revolutionary leadership and authentic workplace culture. Damien appeared at my elbow, champagne flutes in hand. "Gentlemen, I hope you're ready to see the future of corporate innovation in action." The dinner proceeded flawlessly. I delivered my presentation to enthusiastic applause, fielding questions with the confidence born of months of practice. The investors seemed engaged, intrigued by our unconventional approach to leadership and team building. But as the evening wore on, I found myself checking my phone obsessively. No messages from Owen, no updates about Eva. Just silence from the apartment that had become more like a carefully maintained ceasefire than a home. "You seem distracted," Damien observed, during a brief lull between courses. "Just thinking about the presentation," I lied. "I want everything to be perfect." He smiled, his hand finding mine on the table. "It already is. You're extraordinary, Levana. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." The gesture felt natural, expected. Around us, conversations continued, but I was aware of phones being discreetly raised, of the moment being captured and catalogued, more content for the narrative we'd been building. "To authentic leadership," Damien said, raising his glass. "To breaking boundaries," I replied, clinking my flute against his. The kiss that followed was inevitable, scripted by months of building tension and public performance. deeper than the others, more intimate, while the room erupted in appreciative murmurs and the flash of camera phones. When we broke apart, I was breathless, riding the high of another perfectly executed moment. The investors were smiling, charmed by our unconventional display of passion and partnership. But as I scanned the room, basking in the attention, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." I ignored it, too caught up in the evening's success to worry about random messages. Damien was already guiding me toward another group of potential investors, his hand warm on my back, his presence commanding every room we entered. It wasn't until we returned to our table that I noticed the man in the simple black suit standing near the ballroom entrance. He looked out of place among the designer tuxedos and cocktail dresses, professional but understated, holding a manila envelope with the kind of patience that suggested he was waiting for someone specific. "Excuse me," I told Damien. "I need to powder my nose." But as I walked toward the ladies' room, the man stepped into my path. "Levana Thorne?" "Yes?" He handed me the envelope with practiced efficiency. "You've been served." The words hit like ice water. Around us, the party continued. Laughter, conversation, the clink of champagne glasses. But everything felt suddenly muted, distant. Served with what? But he was already walking away, leaving me standing in the middle of the ballroom with the envelope heavy in my hands. My name was printed on the front in block letters, along with an official seal I didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words swam before my eyes. Owen Thorne, petitioner. Levana Thorne, respondent. Filed that morning in family court, complete with attachments I was too shocked to process. "Levana?" Damien appeared at my side, concern creasing his features. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was holding. Around us, the party continued, but I was aware of eyes turning our way, of whispers beginning to ripple through the crowd. Through the ballroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure on the sidewalk below. Owen, standing under a streetlight with his hands in his pockets, looking up at the hotel with the same calm expression he'd worn for weeks. Not angry, not hurt. Finished. As if sensing my gaze, he looked directly at me through the glass. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance, the successful woman in her moment of triumph and the quiet man who had been documenting every step of her journey. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the city night, while I stood frozen in the spotlight, holding the papers that would change everything. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "The guest room is clean. Eva's at my sister's. Take your time reading everything." The envelope slipped from my numb fingers, scattering papers across the marble floor. Custody schedules, financial disclosures, a timeline of events with dates and screenshots I recognized all too well. And at the bottom of the pile, a single sheet of paper with Eva's crayon drawing, the one showing our family divided by black scribbled lines, attached to a note in Owen's careful handwriting. Exhibit A, minor child's perception of parental alienation and emotional distress. The ballroom seemed to tilt around me. The investors, the cameras, the carefully orchestrated moment of triumph, all of it suddenly felt like a stage set, with me as the unwitting star of a play I'd never auditioned for. "Levana," Damien's voice sounded far away. "What's happening? What are those papers?" But I couldn't answer, because finally, horribly, I understood what Owen had been preparing for in his methodical, patient way. Not revenge, evidence. The ballroom lobby became a blur of concerned faces and urgent whispers as I knelt on the marble floor, gathering the scattered papers with shaking hands. Each document felt like a nail in a coffin I'd built myself, page by meticulous page. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A hotel employee approached with professional concern, but I waved him away, clutching the papers to my chest. Damien crouched beside me, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Levana, talk to me. What's in those documents?" I looked up at him, really looked, and saw him clearly for the first time in months. Not the charismatic leader I'd been infatuated with, but a man calculating how this development might affect his own reputation. "Divorce papers," I whispered. His face went pale. Around us, phones were already out, capturing my humiliation in real time. The same devices that had documented my rise were now recording my fall, and I could practically see the headlines writing themselves. "This is just a misunderstanding," Damien said, but he was already stepping back, creating distance between us. "Your husband's obviously having some kind of breakdown." "No." The word came out stronger than I felt. "He's not." Because as I read through Owen's petition, I realized the devastating truth. Every allegation was accurate. Every piece of evidence was real. Every timeline entry was something I had done willingly, publicly, proudly. The viral videos, the social media posts, the family events where I'd prioritized work calls over Eva's stories, the parent-teacher conferences Owen had attended alone while I was in crucial meetings with Damien. It was all there, documented with the thoroughness of a man who had spent his career grading papers and teaching students to support their arguments with facts. "I need to go," I said, struggling to my feet. "Levana, wait." Damien caught my arm, but his grip was loose, performative. "We can spin this. Frame it as a jealous husband trying to sabotage your success. Stop." I pulled away from him, finally seeing our entire relationship for what it was. Not a meeting of minds, not authentic connection, but a carefully orchestrated performance that had spiraled out of control. The investors were watching from their tables, their earlier enthusiasm replaced by uncomfortable fascination. This wasn't the kind of disruption they'd come to see. I walked toward the exit on unsteady legs, the papers clutched in my hands like evidence of my own crimes. Behind me, I could hear Damien already working damage control, his voice carrying across the ballroom as he addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. Sometimes personal challenges remind us why we need strong professional partnerships." But I was already gone, pushing through the hotel's revolving door into the cool night air. The street was empty except for a few late-night pedestrians and the distant hum of traffic. Owen was nowhere to be seen, but I felt his presence everywhere, in the precision of the legal documents, in the careful timing of the service, in the way he'd orchestrated this moment to maximum effect. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The videos from tonight were already spreading, but this time the narrative was different. As served at dinner was trending. Comments ranged from sympathy to schadenfreude, but the overwhelming tone was one of fascination with my public downfall. I scrolled through the responses with morbid curiosity, watching strangers dissect my marriage and speculate about the details in Owen's petition. Some defended me, calling Owen controlling and vindictive. Others praised his strategic patience and shared their own stories of infidelity and betrayal. But it was Marina's comment that cut deepest. Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales, sending love and light during this challenging time. Even my closest ally was already distancing herself, wrapping her abandonment in the language of spiritual wisdom. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and I recognized the driver, Owen's sister, Sarah. She rolled down the passenger window and looked at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Get in," she said quietly. I slid into the passenger seat, still clutching the papers. Sarah didn't speak as she pulled away from the hotel, leaving the scene of my professional triumph and personal destruction behind. "Where's Eva?" I asked finally. "With me. She's fine, confused but fine." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. Owen thought it would be better if she wasn't at the apartment tonight. "How long has he been planning this?" Sarah glanced at me, her expression unreadable. How long have you been giving him reasons to plan it? The question hung between us like an accusation. I wanted to defend myself, to explain about ambition and authenticity and the complex pressures of modern success, but the words felt hollow, meaningless in the face of what I'd lost. He documented everything, I said instead, flipping through the papers. Every video, every post, every moment I chose, work over family. Owen's always been thorough, Sarah agreed. It's one of his best qualities as a teacher, and apparently as a husband protecting his daughter. The apartment building came into view, its windows dark except for the soft glow of the guest room, Owen's sanctuary, where he'd spent months preparing for this moment. He's not angry, I realized aloud. He's just done. Sarah pulled into the parking garage and turned off the engine. Anger would have been easier to fight, she said, but Owen doesn't fight. He builds cases. I sat in the passenger seat, staring up at our apartment windows, and felt the full weight of what I'd traded for applause. A marriage, a family, a man who had loved me enough to document my betrayals with legal precision rather than simply walk away in anger. My phone buzzed with another notification, a news alert. Tech executive's marriage drama goes viral after public divorce serving. The story was already writing itself, spreading across social media platforms and gossip sites. My carefully curated image was dissolving in real time, replaced by a narrative I couldn't control. But as I climbed the stairs to our apartment, envelope heavy in my hands, I realized the most devastating part wasn't the public humiliation or the professional consequences. It was the silence waiting for me behind our door. No more printer humming through the night, no more methodical preparation, just the empty space where a good man's patience used to live, before I mistook his quiet strength for weakness and traded his love for the fleeting approval of strangers. The apartment was exactly as Sarah had described, clean, organized, and utterly empty of the life Owen had built within it. His clothes were gone from the guest room, his papers cleared away. Even his coffee mug was missing from the kitchen sink. On the dining room table, he'd left one final document, a handwritten letter in his careful teacher's script. Levana, by the time you read this, you'll have received the petition. I want you to know this isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about Eva, and giving her a chance to grow up in a home where love isn't performed for cameras. I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for in those moments on stage. I hope it was worth what you gave up to get it. My lawyer will contact you about custody arrangements. I think you'll find them fair. Take care of yourself. Owen. I read the letter 3 times before the tears came, not for my marriage, which I'd destroyed with my own hands, but for the man I'd been too blind to see clearly until he was gone. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility. Inside, I sat alone at our dining room table, surrounded by the evidence of my choices, finally understanding the difference between being celebrated and being loved. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number, probably Owen's new phone. Eva wants to video call at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Please don't disappoint her again. Even in leaving, he was still protecting our daughter, still being the parent I'd forgotten how to be while I was busy being a star. I looked around the empty apartment, our home that had become my stage, our marriage that had become my content, our family that had become my casualty, and finally understood what Owen had been trying to tell me with his folders and timelines and methodical documentation. Some things, once broken, can't be performed back together. The applause had turned to silence, just as the question promised, and in that silence, I was left with the echo of my own choices and the devastating precision